Good morning, or should I say good afternoon. Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we have interviews with our former interns, with the interns of World Information Transfer during the past 10 years, actually 20 years, but this group is the last 10 years. So our moderator is Ariel Granite, which is also one of our former interns. And over to you, Ariel. Hello, Jade. I haven't seen you a long time.
I know.
Ariel, what's going on with you? You seem to be doing exactly what you wanted.
Yeah, it's been great. I was like after WIT, I went on to work in Syria and Iraq. I was living in Lebanon for a bit and then Cambodia, and I branched out from photography and started writing for like Foreign Policy magazine and freelancing. So that was great. And since I've been back in the States, I came back during the height of COVID. And I've been working on a project about how political polarization in America is really impacting families. And I ended up telling a story about these two brothers on opposing sides of these civilian militia movements. And through the intimacy of their relationship and their family, we explored these themes of identity, of race in America. And the lead up to the election, we embedded in communities from BLM and Antifa to some of the Trump and MAGA communities. So it's been a really interesting time. And now we're partnering with production companies and then going off to sell in a few weeks. So it's really exciting.
Well, that means you're sort of getting involved in political situations.
Yeah, I mean, it was never my intention to go into politics because I've always been focused on telling human stories. But I would say this piece isn't meant to be overtly political. There are more themes when it comes to identity for them as, two Black men adopted actually into a white Mormon family. And they grew up in like this colorless world. So it's them trying to understand who they are and what they stand for and just coming to terms with that in very different ways. So, and then moving forward, I was at the Capitol insurrection. I started the story because I was done with conflict work for a while. I never thought that I'd end up getting tear gassed and hit with rubber bullets again in America.
Jade was there.
Good time.
That sounds really exciting. That sounds like you certainly have to have a lot of time and energy to be able to cope with all that.
Yeah, it's been great to work, I think, on a film. This is my first film that I directed, and something that I always craved when I was working just in journalism was always more time. You have such, few resources when it comes to your time on the ground and what you're able to do, even if it's, 5,000 words in a magazine. I reported my story in Cambodia probably for 2 months, and it was about their failure to respond to COVID-19, and with the state apparatus not functioning and protecting the people, the lengths that different spiritual communities were willing to go to provide a sense of safety for themselves, whether that was, animist rituals, sacrificing animals, mass prayer. So I think the lengths that the human spirit will go to find a sense of resolution and safety and community in the face of, a pandemic that we didn't even understand at that time. And a lot of fear was really beautiful and interesting. So yeah, I mean, this film it was a little out of left field for me, but I'm really glad that I took on the challenge, and to get to work with one family for the last 9 months has been great because you get to really, build a really strong relationship with these people. So it's been great. And Moving forward, you know, I want to start my own NGO. I want to work on solutions-based journalism, work with young kids from underprivileged backgrounds, probably here in California, and give them the tools and mentorship to go on and tell their own stories. And I'd love to, you know, as I go back to Syria to work on 2 projects, be able to disseminate cameras and supplies there and do leadership programs and training programs in every community that I go moving forward, so that there's a sustainable impact. And I'm not just, you know, flying in and out. And WIT and working at the UN really helped me reconsider how I go about my work and what it means to affect change on a mass scale. And, you know, it really is, you know, you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the key word is sustainable. And I think education is a big part of that, and investing in young people. So that's the future.
So you planning to go back to Syria to work with this particular family?
Yeah, so I think moving forward, once I finish this project.
Excuse me. Hi, Sehee. Nice seeing you. Hello, we're just listening to Jade and what she's doing now and with her film.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that after I finish this film, I think there are a few topics that I covered earlier in my career as a journalist that I'd really like to go back to through the lens of filmmaking, so I can tell a more dynamic story. And one of them includes the children of former ISIS soldiers who are now trapped in these rehabilitation camps in northern Syria because their countries of origin will not repatriate them, and these kids are dealing with a lot of trauma. And it's a kind of question of can they ever be reassimilated in society, and how do you heal from that kind of violent trauma, and in their case a really violent ideology, and build a different self-concept. Very this idea of a lost generation, and then you have kids that are vulnerable to radicalization. They could be the next generation of jihadists if we don't change some of the behavior and the worldview that they were raised under the caliphate in northern Syria. So I think it's a really important opportunity to explore, one, in a way, the human condition, and if these kids are willing and have an innate desire to want to pursue a path that is a world built not on violence, but on being part of a community.
You can't expect that. And basically, because keep in mind the human nature, we are still part animals, and the human nature is to fight or flight.
Yeah.
And therefore, and the other problem is that if a child is not taught how to behave from the age of being born to about 9, there's the residual, and the aggressive and the killing instinct is exacerbated by training that they're having.
Josh, why don't you start introducing, and then we'll go Jade and then Sehee.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Josh. I was a former WIT intern back in year 2018. I'm from Hong Kong. Nice to see you all.
I'm Jade. I was also a former intern in 2018, so it's nice to be back.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Sehee from Korea. I think I'm a latest intern. I was an intern last year due to COVID-19. I was really have a kind of different time when I was intern, but it was good. And okay, I will talk to you later about it.
Thank you. All right, so now to answer the first question, Josh.
I mean, the most memorable experience working with WIT was that, you know, back in 2018, the interns from Hong Kong, we had a batch of 3 interns from Hong Kong, and Dr. Derbeck asked us to translate the English version of the ecology report into Chinese one, if I've not mistaken.
Yes.
And I've never participated in any, you know, translation work before. And knowing that it is very tight in time constraints, and as well as you know, the complexity of the articles themselves requires a lot of, you know, looking up in dictionary and websites. I think that is a memorable experience for me, because I remember we were given around like 1 to 2 weeks time before our departure to compile the whole report. So yeah, it was a memorable experience for me back then.
And Jade?
I think the most memorable experience for me, one was building friendships. Like, we had such a great class of interns that year, and it was really special to meet so many like-minded people who wanted to affect change in the world, and so many young people that were culturally sensitive and wanted to do more to educate themselves on some of the most pressing issues in our world today. So that was a big one. And then as far as seminars that I attended, some of the ones that really stood out to me related to refugees, sexual related violence and victims of war, and a lot of things that I had experienced and documented as a journalist, then to see how these stories are being told on the other side when it came to these controlled environments, and how these stories actually influence policy, how they're received, was really informative to me as far as how I should move forward as a journalist and as a storyteller. You know, and I do believe that, you know, photography, videography, writing does have the power to change perspectives and to facilitate understanding and cultural awareness, and seeing people respond to that in real time, people in positions of power, was inspiring. And you know, it inspired me to go on and continue to do that work, and hopefully bring it back to the forum of the UN at some point, and just keep giving these voices and empowering people to tell their stories in a wider audience.
Thank you, Jade. And Sehee?
As I told you earlier, I think my memorable thing was like COVID-19, because I was in Europe last year for the internship. Everything was locked up at the moment, so so it was kind of hard to be an intern in that time, but it was like a really good to see and work, or like how UN people work, and how we can see how they operate any international meeting or something like that. Thanks to that experience, like an internship at UN and WIT, I can work as a consultant in Korea now for the official development assistance now.
Thank you, Sehee. I can imagine that it must have been very tricky with the COVID regulations and needing to be virtual. With Jade, Josh, and I, we got to go into the UN, but hopefully, you know, with things reopening, you will get to come back and we can all go back to the UN.
Just adding to Sehee, being here in New York at that time, I remember she was here with like 3 or 4 other interns that before the lockdown started. So it was very difficult for them to actually cope, because she had to stay indoors for I think 2 or close to a month before she actually left for Korea. So it was very difficult. And the rest of the time that she was here in New York, we had to just work with her from home, not even going into the UN because the UN was closed and she couldn't go into work or go into the office because we had already stopped going into the office. And that was a very difficult moment for her. And I think it's very memorable, like she mentioned.
Well, she did a fabulous job. She basically translated most of our webinars into publishing material. There were mistakes, but anyway, she did most of the tedious work, for which we basically published the first set of our speakers, and that's thanks to Sehee.
On to our next question. I wanted to ask you guys if you could talk a little bit about what you're doing now and how the internship has helped in the future path that you're on. And if we could start again with Josh.
Okay, so the intern at WIT involves a lot of meetings and formal discussions among different parties, government bodies, NGOs, and also teenage representatives, youth groups. So I'm now actually working at the transport department in Hong Kong. It is not really directly related, to international relations or political affairs, but I enjoy the process of participating in, stakeholder engagement and also discussion among different stakeholders. Oftentimes when we come across a social issue, there are often, disputes or conflicts. Different parties, they have their own concerns and areas to be addressed. So I think, the internship at WIT helped me, rethink the process of how to not only reach a consensus among different parties, but also to, how to participate in different forms of discussion. And that actually helps me, drive me the interest to work in, the government sector in Hong Kong right now.
You mentioned something, Josh, which is basically the purpose why I started this so many years ago. In order to be able to change anything, you first have to understand it. And United Nations is a world body. And if you learn how the United Nations functions, including the fact that it deals by consensus, which means that all 192 countries have to agree, which is almost impossible to achieve. You learn how you can not only understand the process, but the fact what tools are necessary to be able to change it. And one of the things that's very important is to be able not to be afraid to ask questions and to feel comfortable in asking what other people think and not feel that you cannot answer it. Thanks for mentioning it.
And also, Josh, I remember you saying during our internship that you were going to get into transportation or that you were interested in that area. So it's really cool to see that all kind of come full circle and that you're going through with your path. For you, Jade, next.
Okay, I think my biggest takeaway from working at the UN, when I was really inspired by all of the work that NGOs were doing, and I knew that that's more of the path that I wanted to pursue, because you can maybe circumvent some of the bureaucracy. And it seems like NGOs had a lot of agency when it came to their work and also what they brought to the UN. That includes, WIT working so closely with ECOSOC. Moving forward after the UN, I was really interested in solutions-based journalism, this crossover of documentation, but also advocacy. And I was doing a program at the International Center of Photography on, it was documentation and moving image, things like that. And I used the year that I was in New York to tell the story about one family that is undocumented and what that meant for the children who were then born in New York. And then the mother was unfortunately separated from her child who she left in Ecuador. And that story was published in Yes Magazine, which is a nonprofit magazine. And they dedicated their entire issue due to migration. And I felt that that was a really appropriate medium to tell this kind of story that was about the emotional interior of some of these topics that we learned about at the UN, but you see the human impact. And after that, I was working in some conflict zones in Syria and Iraq. And I tried to bring that sensibility and those values to my work there. And rather than just covering the front lines of the conflict, I was focused on documenting 3 families within the scope of a week who were at the front line, were forced to flee the front line into a really uncertain future in these refugee camps. So circling back to what I'm doing now, I had to come to the US in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I've since been working on a film that addresses some of the polarization in the US, but we're telling that story through the lens of 2 brothers on opposing sides of the aisle. So trying to advance the story of bipartisanship and communication and deconstructing this idea of the other, because I think that's something that's really hurting our society now, this fear of people who have opposing beliefs. So similar to what Dr. Durbeck said about having a form of communication, of safe communication, and I'm just trying to work in line with those values. What am I to? Hold on, I think I just got a parking ticket.
Oh.
You see what I'm getting? Oh my goodness.
Okay, I think Jade had to run really quickly, but Sehee, why don't you go?
Okay, I think the biggest benefit I got at the UN and WIT was like I got a really big knowledge of other countries' people and culture, and like I participated in the UN Women Festival. It was like they discuss about their gender and how difficult to be a woman in their country or something. It was really helpful to understand other countries' people. And now I'm doing official development assistance. So we are doing environmental and social impact assessment before Korean support other countries. And before we are making a dam or any constructions, we need to make sure indigenous people, they don't get any hurt or any like negative impacts for it because of the construction or something. So it makes me really understand other culture and things when I was work at the UN and WIT. So it was really helpful, and now I can be more understandable and have a big knowledge of other countries. So yeah, I think that's really grateful.
Well, along those lines of that answer, I wanted to also ask, what advice would you give to people who want to join WIT in both like your process and finding this internship to, when they join, and for current interns too, like how would you suggest to best utilize the internship based off of your own experience? We can go from you and then we'll do like a reverse.
Okay.
Reverse, all right.
Yeah. Okay. Just being at the UN, it was like kind of big deal for me because I can see a lot of people from really a lot of countries, and I never like really could hear any of them in person. So it was really good for me. So just being there and being internship is gonna be really helpful for your experience, I think. And for the intern, I want to suggest you. I don't know how to say. I just think I was just being hard and work so hard and just being listen a lot and attend lots of meeting. I think that's will be good for you. So you can just get a lot of knowledge and can just, even though you don't understand what they're saying, but still it's going to be helpful one day after.
Thank you, Sehee. And Jade?
Yeah, I think the best way to utilize your time at the UN is really just take every opportunity to attend as many meetings as you can. I think if there's something that you feel naturally drawn to or an issue that resonates with you, just take it, one, as an opportunity to pursue every meeting and forum about that issue, but also like taking initiative to talk to some of the people leading those meetings, some of the people who are making those decisions and writing those reports, and building relationships. And like Dr. Drabek said, like, don't be afraid to kind of go out of your comfort zone, ask questions. I know that was really scary for me to ask questions at the UN. There are just so many people, but it's good to feel heard. And, you know, you guys are the next generation of leaders. So use your voice and use the opportunity at the UN to start your advocacy work.
Yeah, I agree with your view, that Jade's view, that you know, actually the UN offers a lot of opportunity for people to attend meetings. And I mean, given that everything has come to normal, such that, you know, especially for the future interns of WIT, if they wish to go to UN, they can join meetings back to the normal times. I will also recommend people who are interested in joining the UN, whether or not interns for WIT. I mean, you can also browse a lot of, you know, information online before your departure. I mean, say there's a page called the web page called the Journal of the UN, which actually provides, you know, a schedule of the daily meetings, both official and also the informal meetings online. Some of them will be recorded online as well and broadcast live. So if you want to get a feel of how the UN works, you can actually make good use of these online tools to help you get familiarized with the operation, you know, the communication tools, and how dialogues revolve around different meetings. And I mean, if you really have the chance to visit UN, I will also recommend you to get some of the, you know, flyers, booklets, pamphlets distributed, you know, at the main entrances, or sometimes, you know, distributed at the alleys of the conference rooms, because these information materials will help you get a better understanding of what's going on, you know, who are the key speakers, what the issues are, and also some of the contact information of those parties. So in case you want to, you know, dig deeper into some of the more specific issues or SDGs, you can keep in touch with them in direct. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought up the UN Daily Journal and those pamphlets, because for any interns that are tuning in, exactly what Josh had said, it's so great to be able to have this journal that lists out all of the meetings daily. You get to go in, you look at the description, you'll see who's attending, you get to see their name, their email. It gives you a lot of good ways to have resources and reach out to people. So I could not agree more. I wanted to also have you guys talk a little bit about your experience writing the very short 3-paragraph little blogs and summaries. See, I don't know if you had to do that, but I feel like that was a very core part of learning about how to conceptualize and still express what's going on in the world, but in a very condensed manner. And so I just wanted to hear your, you know, feedback on that, and for future interns too. So why don't we start? Yeah, we'll do the reverse order again.
Can I ask other participants so I can understand more about that?
Yeah. Why don't we start them with Josh?
Sorry.
No problem.
I mean, writing the 3-paragraph summary is a challenging task. I mean, Dr. Delbeck mentioned it at the very beginning of our internship, that this is something serious. This is something that has to be dealt with care and prudence, because oftentimes we attend meetings with duration up to 2 or 3 hours, and how to summarize the key points. I mean, throughout the whole 2 or 3 hour meetings, you have a lot of different people, have a lot of different countries. They have their own political agenda and they want to raise different kinds of issues. And it's not easy to summarize that. And sometimes I will make reference to the abstract of the meeting because, just as I've mentioned, they will distribute flyers or pamphlets at the conference rooms at the entrances. So that would be it is not directly copying that, but it's like making reference to how they try to bring up the key points. It's one technique. Another technique I think is crucial is that because these meetings often revolve around, SDGs. So I think one good idea is that if you are aware of that issue is somehow related to, SDG number 1 or number 2, then you may try to link that so that, it can easily associate with the theme of the meeting and also the core values of the UN. So I think that are some of the tips. Not sure if they are practical or not, but at least I've tried.
I think those are super helpful. Absolutely. Jade, what was your experience with tips? Did you have the same ones we did?
Yeah, Josh, that was such a great answer, especially connecting them back to the SDGs. I think it's just being engaged in the meetings for me, writing down quotes, people's names, sometimes like doing more research into their work. And as you were saying, kind of stepping back and maybe looking at it in a more abstract way, I think I would just try to get to the heart of what's the issue that they're trying to address, what are their proposed solutions, and how people are responding to those solutions and what progress they were able to make in the meeting, and who was engaged in the dialogue and how they were able to kind of progress their point of view. So I don't know if that helps, but just, stay engaged, write good notes, and you'll be good. I think I wrote the most amount of summaries in my class, right? I wrote more summaries than anyone.
Sehee, did you write summaries?
Yeah, I did. I just remember that time. Actually, I was not native speaker in English, so I record every meetings I attended. So I heard that things after the meeting at night and over, and I tried to understand more about it. And before I attended the meeting, as Joshua said, I checked the meeting summaries, like kind of in UN website, so I understood more about the meeting before I attended, and I just listen and try to write down everything I heard, and after that, I went to the my home and I repeated to listen, and I got the summary. So if any interns are not native speaker, they may not really have feel comfortable to make the summaries. It's kind of hard mission for me. I think if you just do it over and over it, and you're gonna be improve a lot at the end of the internship. So just cheer up. I guess that's my tip.
Those are all really great tips. Thank you so much, guys. I wanted to see if Dr. Durbeck or Fred had any questions as well.
That's really good points from Josh, Jade, and Sehee. And one thing that we always emphasize to all the interns is that it is always good to check the meetings online. Like now, everything is shared online because the meetings are online, and you will have to check the material online. Those material that you find on those pamphlets, they publish them online, so you can read them ahead of time to be prepared for any upcoming meeting. So there's a few questions that came in, and this one particularly is for all of you. Can you give any specific advice to interns who are working virtually? I know for the three of you, this is from one of our Korean interns.
Yeah, I guess it's me. When I was in New York, everything was in a lockdown, so it makes me really depressed because I was really ambitious before I go to the New York and UN, but it was not quite like happy to be just staying at home all day. But still, it was helpful to participate in lots of meeting in virtually, because maybe when you go to the UN actually in person, then you can really attend lots of meeting at once or a day. But when I was work as with the computer and virtually, it was really convenient in a way to work and meet people, and I also can meet more people with the virtual conference, because they just match the people to talk like in the meeting. So when you go to the meeting at the UN, maybe you can't really get a chance to actually talk to participants in the meeting. But virtually, I participated in a meeting. I could talk to the speakers and something like that. So maybe you can find more opportunity if you work virtually, I guess. And
Thank you, Sehee. And Jade?
It might be harder for Josh and I to answer because we just didn't have the virtual experience, but I think, I mean, it's great that you guys still took the opportunity and the initiative to work with WIT, be a part of those meetings. I think it's probably a challenge to be isolated and to only have the perspective through the laptop versus being there in person. I think it enforces a kind of reverence that I'm sure you guys still have. But you know, you feel like the culture at the UN and the gravity of some of the situations and the conflicts that they have to deal with, and how they're influencing policy. But I'm sure you guys did a great job and took advantage of some of the flexibility with pursuing the internship virtually as well. I think that's amazing. And I commend you guys for doing this and, you know, being all over the world. And I guess I would encourage you guys to, you know, reach out to each other and be a community. Like I said, like one of the best parts of the internship for me was the friendships that we built and how close our class got. So definitely take advantage of the connection you guys have too. And yeah, I think you can still log on to the UN meetings. I think they're open to the public. So if there are topics you guys are interested in, like keep going, keep pursuing that knowledge.
Yeah, I know it takes huge courage for, you know, current interns to do intern without physically attending any meetings at the UN headquarters. And I mean, it's really different. I mean, attending meetings face to face and attending meetings online, because you don't get the opportunity to really sit in that particular arena, you know, just to see, as Jade mentioned, you know, the gravity of the UN. So I feel like for online meetings, I'll recommend you to really stay more focused I mean, because I mean, back in face-to-face meetings, sometimes it's really hard to trace back, who's speaking, what kind of issue. And I think this would be a little bit more complicated when it moves to online meetings. You can't really see, the face or the picture of somebody really clearly as you're sitting right in front of the screen, with a lot of distractions around you. So I mean, focus would help, and I'm sure you all could overcome it.
What is important is to really, when you're listening on Zoom, you really need to focus on the main ideas, because as you know, especially those of you who were participants during when UN was very active, is that it's very easy to get distracted. But if you listen carefully, and especially if the speaker is a good speaker, you will get the main points. And in summaries, I think that that's one of the most important things that I think all of the interns learn, that you just pick the core important things and you write what is actually of importance and relevance. The rest is really unimportant. And some people at the UN, as you know, they can talk for an hour and say absolutely nothing. And some are very good in defining the particular principles and the particular perspective that they think is relevant. That's a very, very good point, Jans.
That's very good. Thank you for highlighting that, Dr. Rabak. And one thing also is that a lot of students in the past have also said that some of the meetings become boring when they hear things being repeated over and over by different speakers. So like Josh mentioned earlier, when you're picking key points or bringing out key takeaways from the meetings, sometimes you look for those words or those phrases that are repeated several times by different speakers to constitute your key or main points that spoken during the meeting. So another question that we have here, actually it's from Tracy, one of our new interns too. So can you tell us your views towards the UN and international cooperation in general? Whether your views towards the UN and international cooperation has changed after the internship? Let's begin with George.
Now, I wish I had the capacity to answer this question though, because, interning there at 2 months and, being able to gauge my views on international cooperation might seem a little bit outreach, but, in terms of right now where we are situated in COVID-19, I mean, everything is different, and it does require a lot of, communication tools and also strategies on how to tackle worldwide issues. I mean, apart from COVID-19, you have a lot of issues surrounding everywhere, like poverty, environmental pollution, or economic and trade, that you need communication among different countries. And I mean, you can't separate communication from cooperation. That's, I mean, and also understanding as well, as Dr. Delbecq has mentioned, I mean, the key to international cooperation, I mean, especially in terms of complex worldwide issues, I think is, understanding and cooperation among different countries. And rather than emphasizing the differences among different countries, I mean, it's more important to look for the similarities and the common grounds that we should be looking for, I mean, in the next 10 or 20 years or for our future generation.
Very good points.
Great. Jade?
I think my biggest takeaway was before I went to the UN, I'd had experiences through my work of being in a lot of countries that weren't big players in the world economy. It's something that's really important to me. I think the most valuable resource in the world is human potential. And there are a lot of communities, unfortunately, that don't have the resources that they need to reach their full potential. And you see what happens in countries and in communities where there's resource scarcity. It can create conflict, poverty, and just devastation. And when I went to the UN, I was very idealistic, but I had my own doubts about how what we could really do, tangibly do, to improve conditions worldwide. And then once I learned about the SDGs and what all of these people who are so passionate are doing in pursuit of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the way that they're broken down gave me a lot of hope that, you know, this nebulous idea of world peace can be achieved just by providing the resources that people need, and not just providing aid, but stimulating economies, providing jobs, and empowering people to, you know, do the best with what they have in every opportunity. And I think that starts with education, economy stimulation, jobs. And, you know, a big topic for me was looking at refugees and different refugee crises around the world. And so hearing proposed solutions, I think, was inspiring for me and gave me hope for the future, and that there is still a lot we can do, and just continuing to raise awareness and direct people back to the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals, I think, is important.
Great, thank you, Sehee.
Yeah, I really agree with Jade. And when I was at the UN, I was really happy to meet people who really care about the world and how we can improve our world to be more happy and something like that. So here's where international cooperation is like, for me, it was like hope. So like we achieve the goals together, and there are so many people who think like me. Like in Korea, I can't really meet any people who think about the poverty or something like that. They're more focused on their own life, but I can see a lot of people who want to achieve the more broad goal with another country's people. So I think for me it was really a good experience. And I work in the UNESCO in Korea, so I think like I saw education is the most important thing for the achieving the better world. But I think just communicating and being together is also really good opportunity to achieve this SDGs or something like that. And I feel that when I was at the UN. So
Okay, that's another question for the three of you. Can you share one memorable experience during which you ask questions to speakers, and during a meeting or after a meeting, and how the answers inspired you at that time or after? So let's just follow the same format. Josh, you can go ahead and start.
I remember attending a meeting at ECOSOC, if I've not mistaken. The meeting is about ocean conservation and about children who have been displaced from islands due to rising sea levels. So they invite a lot of youth representatives from these island countries to talk about their own experiences. And some of them are really young, like still studying high school. And I asked them, like, really drew you the intention to stand up for your country or stand up for your hometown and be an activist in ocean conservation? And I remember there was one little girl in the meeting. I forgot what country she was from, And she answers that if she didn't have the opportunity to speak at the UN by then perhaps the world around would not have so much attention or would not be so aware of the situation of rising sea level back then. And she didn't want her family, her children, or her future generation to be drowned in the ocean. So that's why she thought she had the motivation and the initiative to speak up for her own country.
That's what the children from the South Pacific, they were talking about what was happening with the floods and the raising of the ocean. That's very good that you remembered that. I was at that meeting, so.
Okay.
Yes, it was a very, there's a couple meetings where they had children. They were talking about what's happening when their homes are being completely flooded and devastated. It was a very, very powerful meeting,
to challenge convention and demand action and speak up when, there are injustices in the world that you think we need to address.
Well, it's a very, very good point, and it was a very traumatic time during that time. The point is that it is very important to understand the reasons from both sides. And I think that that's one of the things that journalists forget, to find out the raison d'etre, why these things happen. Because things happen because of certain events or certain patterns that are not addressed, and they are only addressed when it is at the point of boiling. And unfortunately, many journalists forget to investigate the history of what has happened that has caused this situation.
Jade, you have a lot of questions coming in directed to you specifically. So the first question that came in to Jade is, how did you get your assignment in Afghanistan?
I've never been to Afghanistan, so I don't know where the question is coming from.
That was from your intro. I think you said something about Syria or Afghanistan. That's where that came from.
Oh, right. It was Syria and Iraq.
And Iraq. Yes, I think it's Iraq.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, Iraq. I was waiting, the second time that I went to Syria, I was waiting to get journalistic access into the country. And while waiting for my permit, we did a story, me and another journalist, on some of the bombings on the border of Syria. The PKK, which is recognized as a terrorist organization technically by the UN, actually were hiding in the mountains. And I think the Iraqi Kurdish forces were bombing the area. And it was a story about the impact on civilians. A few civilians had died in the attacks. Yeah, this was a while ago, so I'm trying to remember the specific stories, but it was just about civilian casualties in the area. And we reported that for about a week before crossing into Syria to cover the Turkish incursion into Rojava, which is a semi-autonomous Kurdish state in northern Syria. Did I answer the question? But never.
Yeah. So the last question for you, Jade, is please tell me, what was the motivation in choosing your profession? Where can I see photos of your projects?
Yeah, well, you can see photos of my projects on my website, and I think there are links in my website to some of the articles that I've published and exhibitions. Maybe I can put that into the chat.
What was your biggest motivation in starting an internship at the W?
You're on mute now, but I hear you. I heard you. Okay, motivation. As I mentioned, that I worked at the UNESCO in Korea, so I wanted to be the UN headquarters to learn more about the countries and more culture and more diversity from other countries, people and things. And so I always want to learn and meet people and there was really big opportunity to be an internship at the UN and WIT. My motivation was just want to learn something about the world.
All right, see, thank you. Josh?
I think it's the exposure and the opportunity, you know, to get involved in this roundtable of different issues, you know, political leaders, has all excited me. I've always wanted to come back after the COVID-19.
Well, it will be very nice to see you. And Jade, what was your motivation?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just getting the other perspective, the interior perspective of the people that are actually making decisions that influence policy in the world stage, and seeing also what is possible and how people are advocating for change. And sometimes change is slow, and just accepting that, but like progress is progress. Yeah, it was still an inspiring experience. Josh, let's go back to the UN. We'll reunite the 2018 Dream Team.
And finally,
yeah, sure.
my question is to you, where do you see yourself in 10 years? We'll start with Josh, then Jade, and Sehee.
Well, I mean, in 10 years, I hope that I will be more willing to try different things. And I mean, in my career, I hope to, you know, rotate among different positions, you know, such that I have more experience in dealing with, you know, public transportation in Hong Kong.
Oh, you want to remain in transportation. Okay. Jade, where do you see yours in 10 years?
I'm looking to build my own NGO that focuses on solutions-based journalism, but also empowering youth from underprivileged communities to tell their own stories. I think, you know, looking towards the future rather than going into communities and conflicts where I am very much an outsider, I would just like to give kids resources to develop their own projects, whether it's through photography or video, and create an archive of narrative-driven stories that come from the interior experience.
Okay, so you plan to stay in journalism and start your own NGO in order to be able to influence younger people to make the world better. Okay, that's a very, very noble goal. And Sehee, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I don't know, I can't imagine. I'm 45 years old.
Okay, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, I think I just started my current job, so I want to build my career in this area so I can help, not help, just want to build up the more better world with people and with another country's people and something like that. I will be just be me, and I hope I will be more wiser than now.
Well, there's one thing about you, Sehee, you are a really very hard worker and you're dedicated to the task. So whatever you decide to do, I know that you do very well. Now, Ariel, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Where do I see myself in 10 years? Hopefully still pushing WIT and making us into something that continues to push and empower youth to be involved and to further awareness about global issues and just to continue to make the world a better place. That is where I hope.
Well, there's no reason why your goal cannot be achieved, that's for sure. But I just want to tell you that it is extremely important for all of you that have had the experience and you know how international organizations and communities work, for you to spend your time, if you if not only if you want to, but if you're able to, and most of you are able to focus on having people understand that not only they have responsibility to themselves, but they also have the responsibility to the rest of the world, so that you do not see your world destroyed during your time. Because we're really in a bad situation right now, and we really have to bring about changes. And these changes have to be done a lot by all young people, so that they know that they have responsibility to one another, and they have to make sure that everybody works to make this world better. Not that just some are with the handouts and some are doing all the work. That's extremely important. So with that, I just want to thank you very, very much for being here. I hope to be able to call upon you again. And if there's anything that we can do, just get in touch either with Ariel or Fred or me. And we'll be very, very happy to answer any of your questions. So again, thank you. And Ariel, you want to say the last word?
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending and joining. And we'll be having a session again next week. Thank you, Dr. Durbeck. And thank you, interns, for participating. It was so nice to see everyone again.
Yes, actually, we have a very good speaker next. We have Dr. Steiner, which is an excellent person. So if you can, and then on the 38th, we have the ambassador from Albania. So if you can, join us. We'll be happy to hear your thoughts.